So this book started in some ways by watching my kids, who were at the time about 12 and 10, reading John Lewis's graphic narrative March, all about his own life. And I saw how much they engaged with his story. And I thought, wow, it'd be amazing to tell a story about refugees as a comic. And so I reached out to a place called Iris, which is a resettlement agency that helps find refugees a home here in Connecticut. And the guy that ran it, Chris George, was a friend of mine. I said, Chris, I would love to tell this story through the perspective of a kid, maybe a Syrian kid who is a refugee here in the United States. Do you have anyone in mind? And he said, Jake, I have this idea. What if we found a family that was arriving in the US and you were there on the day they arrived? You watched them land and just started following them from day one. And I said, yeah, that'd be cool. Do you have anyone in mind? And he said, yeah, there's this family called the Aldebans, two brothers, each have their own families, and they're arriving on election day. This is 4 years ago, 2016. So he said, why don't you do this? Why don't you go to the bus terminal where they're going to be coming from the airport? You can see them when they land, you can kind of wave at them, and then you can circle back a few days later and propose what you want to do with your comic. And the idea is that it would appear every week in the New York Times as a comic, but it would be true. So I said, okay, that sounds cool. So on November 8th, 2016, I showed up and waited for these families to arrive. They had fled Syria, where there had been a civil war. They had been waiting in Jordan for about 4 years. And there was a whole large family with a grandmother and many aunts and uncles, and some of them had been given the green light to come to America. So anyway, those that arrived, I saw them, I kind of waved. There was a kid who was 15 at the time named Naji, who you'll meet in a little bit. And they kind of smiled and said, hey. And I said, I'm going to come visit you in a few days and talk to you more. Anyway, I get home that night and I checked the news, and everyone had been saying that Hillary Clinton was going to win that election. And when I checked the news around 11 p.m., it was already clear from the polls that the election was not going the way that the experts said it was going to go. And by 3 in the morning, when I went on again, it had the headline in the New York Times that said Trump triumphs. And one of the first things that I thought when I saw that headline was, oh my gosh, this family, they've landed in one country, but they're going to wake up tomorrow morning in another country. Because all politics aside, whether you were for Hillary or whether you were for Donald Trump, the reality is that Trump had been saying that he was going to close the door to refugees, particularly those coming from Muslim countries. And for the Aldebans, this was a big deal because if you remember, grandma and some of the aunts and uncles were still back in Jordan. And this meant that the family was effectively separated. And I thought, wow, this is very dramatic. This would be a really powerful way to tell the story of the times through the eyes of this family and this kid. I want to go and hopefully convince them to participate in this comic. So I pay a visit to Naji's house. Remember, Naji's that 15-year-old kid that I waved at across the parking lot. I brought my translator, a guy named Mohammed Kadala, great translator, who happened to be from the same small town in Syria called Homs, where the Aldebans were, which was cool. It'd be like, I'm from Buffalo. It'd be like meeting another guy from Buffalo. It's like, hey, man, you follow the Bills, that kind of stuff. And I thought this will be great because they'll have a connection. And I went there and my translator started talking with the family. And Naji sat right next to me. And every time my tea glass got about this far from being empty, he filled it back up. And he didn't have a lot of English, but we did talk a little bit. And at one point, I noticed that all the kids in the room were back getting like an English lesson from some of the volunteers that were trying to get their English up to speed. But Naji was sitting with his parents. And I remember saying to him at some point, Naji, how come you aren't sitting with your brothers and sisters, with the other kids? And he said to me, it wasn't on the first visit, but it was on one of the early visits. He said, Jake, the thing is, I stopped being a kid when I was 10 years old. And I thought, that's a kind of odd thing to say. Why did he stop becoming a kid why was he no longer a kid at the age of 10? What happened to him? And this almost became like kind of a mystery, a riddle that I felt like I wanted to solve. I knew that Naji had this story about something that had happened to him in Syria and that it was powerful. But it would take a long time before the full story would come out. And I ended up spending about 4 years embedded with the Aldeban family. I went to school with Naji and his sisters. I went to job training with his dad. I went to art. His mother was an artist. I went to her art shows. I went to the mosque with his uncle. I almost became kind of a part of the family. And there were some really scary moments for them. They at one point got a death threat, a very scary, incredible death threat, who's someone who knew their name, knew the house where they lived, and said they were going to kill them. And they had to leave the house. I was there maybe the night or two after the threat, and they were so spooked. So for 4 years, I've followed this family around. And what I saw and what I learned all became part of this book called Welcome to the New World. Originally, it was a series in the New York Times, and then it became this book. And you're actually going to see the book in a few minutes when my friend Kira and I actually show you a few pages from the book. And then, most excitingly, you're going to meet Naji, who is the 15-year-old kid. He's now 19. And I'm going to let Naji tell a lot of his own story in his own words. Because someone once told me, the best storyteller knows when to get out of the way and let the story tell itself. So with that being said, I think I'm going to turn it over to my friend Kira from the Anti-Defamation League. And together, we're going to show you a little bit of the book and show you how we use pictures and artwork to bring the story to life.
Thanks, Jake. I'm going to share my screen so that we can start reading part of the book together. Before we get started and dive in reading, Jake, what part of the book is this? Can you remind us?
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Kira. So this is the point where Naji and his family have landed in America. They spent a whole bunch of weeks going to doctor's appointments, getting signed up for school, getting everything set. And it is their first day of school. And they are like, imagine you on your first day of school. They're nervous, but they're doubly nervous because their English isn't that good. And Amal, the sister, is wearing a hijab, which is a head covering, which is traditionally what young women and women wear in Syria, where she's from. So here they are, looking at the school, getting ready to enter on the first day. Awesome. Should we just start, Kira?
Yeah, let's get started.
Okay, so you see the little bubbly thing with little curves, that's a thought. And so that's the dad thinking. And he's thinking, well, at least Naji will blend in.
Maybe you want to wear a hat over your hijab?
You want to read her too, Kira?
Then what will I do when it's warm? No, I'm fine.
Then inside, Naji's thinking, I love this dress code. Seriously, did everyone just roll out of bed or what?
And Amal's thinking, what the?
And the volunteers brought them thought, OMG, what is going on? Naji will never let me live this down. Then down below, that's the ESL teacher. Welcome to the Valley School. As you see, today is Pajama Day. My name is Mr. Gutierrez. Call me Mr. G. I teach all the ELLs, English language learners. Hello, I'm Naji.
Attaboy, keep that grip. I'm Amal. You could have given me a heads up about Pajama Day. I gave them a whole speech about the dress code.
Yeah, sorry about that.
As you can see, Amal plans to keep her hijab.
That's fine.
Thank you, but I don't want the kids to stick out too much. To be honest, Mr. G, I'm concerned about their safety, especially them wandering home on their own.
Don't worry. We'll make sure they get on the bus. And oh, by the way, normally there is a dress code, pants and a golf shirt, no hoodies if they have any kind of words or writing on them. Hey, and these are all our new ELL students. They're from Syria. Can you introduce yourselves?
Hey, I'm Yasmin from Algeria.
Hi, I'm Chris. Go ahead, Kira.
Hi, I'm Christina from Peru.
Today, I want everyone to draw his or her dream house. This is like your ideal, perfect home. Then I want you to present it to the class in English. This is my dream house. It has lots of animals and lots of safety. I like to be safe.
Look what time it is. Do you think we can say our prayers?
No. This is an American school. Where'd we even do it?
Ring, ring.
No one's bumping into my shoulder or knocking on my book bag like in Diary of a Wimpy Kid. It's more like they don't even see me. Oh no, where's Amal? Wait, there she is. A real American locker. It's not all that exciting.
Come on, we'll be late for gym. Can I just tell you how much I am not looking forward to this?
So today, a special kind of dodgeball. Throw the if you catch it, remember to, and then you run. But careful, don't do that. So those are the rules.
Did you catch what he said?
Not really. I mean, he was talking pretty fast.
So why'd you keep nodding your head?
Because I wanted the other kids to think I speak English.
But you don't really.
Amal, you have to run. Keep moving.
Okay, so that's it for today. The school bus will take you home to your neighborhood.
Wait, the bus, it won't go to our house?
No, it drops you off on Monroe Avenue.
Oh, wait a minute. I don't know that place. And my dad, he's worried about us getting lost.
Oh, you guys got nothing to worry about. This is our school resource officer, Mr. Reynolds. He'll take you home. Everyone's watching us.
They probably think we've been arrested. So much for making a good impression.
Just laugh so they'll know everything's good.
Haha.
And I think that is where we're going to stop for now. But of course, there's so much more that we could read. And I would love to invite all of our participants to open up their chat box and get ready to work with us to unpack some of the themes of the graphic novel through the section we just read. So let's start with a question that just about everyone can relate to. How does it feel to be the new kid or to be in an unfamiliar place? If you go ahead and open your chat and make sure you're typing to all panelists and attendees so that everybody can see what you have to say. And if you're with your whole class, please share whatever ideas they would like to share. So I'm seeing it's really intimidating. You can feel anxious and vulnerable. And I'm seeing a lot of scary, alone, awkward. Absolutely. And I think no matter what you are coming from, to be brand new, to be in an unfamiliar place, you can get that sense of loss. And that feeling of alone and like you're not sure what to do. So we're going to take a look at we're going to dive into some of the panels that we just examined. And keep that feeling in the back of your mind and look at how did this book capture that feeling and capture the experience. So I want to start with these 4 panels here. And tell me what it is you notice about these 4 panels from the graphic novel. We have Naji and Amal in these 2 top panels side by side. And then below we see just Naji looking for Amal and he finds her at her lockers. Tell me some of the things you see. Yeah, so I'm seeing some ideas in the chat. Lisa says that no one is talking to them or acknowledging them. They're surrounded by unfamiliar people. They seem isolated and lost. And yes, noticing that from Naji's thought patterns, their idea of an American school comes from books, right? There's this feeling of being unseen or invisible and not knowing anyone, being scared about being separated and isolated. Yeah, and so we really get that strong feeling. And let's think about how that happened. We know that Naji, telling a little bit about how Naji and Amal are feeling, how can we tell from the images? And I highlighted these 2 pair of panels with Naji and Amal side by side. What do we see that tells us what they're feeling? They don't quite say it here. Think about what did the author and the illustrator here do to show those feelings of isolation? Okay, so you've got body language, hands in the pockets, worried looking faces. They're sticking close together, looking sideways. Absolutely. Their closeness to each other, the person that they trust. Excellent. Yeah, and I want to point out like a couple more pieces. Looking at the background now, what is going on behind Naji or next to Naji and Amal throughout these panels. Their faces we see very clearly, their body language we see very clearly. What about what's going on around them? It's noise and chaos, the noise of the bell telling us we're moving from onto the next thing. There are many students and they're blurry. Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, and thanks, Joan. No individuals. Everybody else is just like a mass of unfamiliars and not seeing a whole lot of welcoming going on. Thank you. Let's go ahead now and look at a few. We're going to look at the panels in the next section where they're at gym class. What do we notice about these panels? Take a look at the dialogue, at the images. So again, we see the two of them, Naji and Amal, isolated from interacting with other people. And there's this sense of loss and wanting to feel like they're involved, but feeling lost amidst what's going on, not necessarily understanding. What do the speech bubbles tell us about their experience? What is happening in those bubbles? Right, there's an assumption that they might understand the game, but as Thomas says, they're missing a lot of details. Only a fraction of what is being said is actually something that they can understand, right? And there's some confusion. And they have this shared experience of supporting each other and both feeling, like they're lost, but right now nobody else is trying to reach out to them, right? Or have that experience and making sure that they are understanding what's going on. And then what's happening over here with Amal? We have the illustrator chose to put these lines going around in a circle over and over again. And then we have many people around Amal. I see Joanne saying instructions are coming at them too fast. Natalie pointing out she's just running in a circle, maybe not sure what she's supposed to be doing, right? But Naji told her just keep running. What about the other people in this image? What do you see them doing? Yeah, everybody's looking at Amal. And this is actually, compare this to the previous pages or the previous panels we just looked at where nobody was even looking at Amal or Naji. Now everybody is looking at her, but not necessarily in a positive way, right? Not in a way to affirm and support, but just noticing and, like Joan said, not saying anything, and Marie, that they're staring. Lisa said that they're looking, but they're not helping. Yeah, so let's zoom out. Think back to what you just said about what it feels like to be new. What connections can you make to Naji and Amal's experience on their first day of school? What are some common themes that stretch across this novel, but also your own experience, let's say, of feeling new and out of place? And then as a follow-up question, what are some actions that another student or an adult in the building could have taken to be an ally that would have changed their experience at school? And what might be the impact if people took these actions to act as an ally, right? We see that it's really exhausting being the new kid, right? You want to seem like you know what you're doing, but there's that fear, there's that anxiety. Everything is brand new. So what more could have been done, right? What would you like to, if this was your school, what would you hope or what would you support your students to do to act as allies? Right? Maybe having a student buddy, someone to show them around, a peer mentor, identifying someone to connect with, finding, someone reaching out to them, come and eat lunch with us, right? Or offering some support. Someone could have helped them all with the game, right? Introduced themselves and explained. And even if a translator is available, Laura, I love that idea of like using translator apps. I know I use that all the time when I am traveling. Awesome. So a big theme of this book that I see is this call to action, right? We may not be aware of the immigration or migration background or the refugee background of every single person in our school, but we know that at any point, there is going to be someone in our school who feels new, who feels out of place and is intimidated. And there are things that we can do to make their experience a little bit easier, to show compassion, knowing that that experience of being new is something universal that we can connect to, and offering support. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for now. And I want to thank you for engaging in this analysis. So this is a kind of activity that we want to be talking about with our students all the time, right? This, using a story like this of the experience of young people who are arriving at a new school, arriving at a new place, and building that call to action to act as an ally.
And I will say Kira is from the Anti-Defamation League. She's a former elementary school teacher, so she knows how to bring this classroom experience into her work. Thank you so much, Kira.
Thank you.
Jake, I think you want to introduce us now to someone who is very, very special, the protagonist of the book, Naji Aldeban. He's going to be joining us from Connecticut.
That's right. Hi, guys. So you saw pictures of Naji and his sister Amal in school, and now you get a chance to meet Naji. He's more grown up than when you see from those pictures, because Naji is now 19 years old, and he is joining us from West Hartford. Hey, Naji.
Hi everyone, I am Naji Aldeban, and I'm so happy to be here today. Excited also to share our story with the writer Jake Halpern.
That's great, Naji. So Naji, we've seen a little bit of what your life was like once you got to America, but maybe let's turn back the clock and start kind of at the beginning. When you were 10 years old, you lived in the town of Homs, Syria, and before the Syrian civil war, your life was pretty good. Tell us a little bit about what life was like for 10-year-old Naji in good times.
It was just like anyone else. We had our own house, which at that time was pretty difficult. Everyone was renting, but thankfully my parents worked hard, and my dad had his phone store. We really, we would, after we come back from school, we'd gather with my grandmother's house, me and my uncles. There's like 28, 30 people in the same house. It was a lot of fun.
Wow, this was at your grandmother's house.
Yes, yeah.
So that was like a lot of kids running around.
Yeah, oh my God, it was the best.
What did you guys do? Like hide and seek, play soccer?
We would go outside in the street, play with our friends, race with bicycles. It was a lot of fun.
So life is pretty good. It sounds a lot like my own kid's life here in America, but then things start to change. The situation in Syria gets bad because there are protests in the street for freedom. It's part of what they call the Arab Spring. And President Assad, instead of opening up to reforms and democracy, cracks down on this and actually, in cases, opens fire on the protesters get shot. And then these mass arrests start happening where the security forces come in and just grab people and arrest them, letting them know no one is safe. And one day these security forces, they come to your home and they knock on your door. And can you tell us what happens then?
So on that day, protesters were there. That was pretty much the first time we see protesters. They left the street. Suddenly they come to our house, and they talked to my dad. They were like, they had a baseball mat. One of them had a baseball mat. The other one has big guns, and they're like regular militaries. The tanks were outside. They knocked on the door. They talked to my dad for a while, and they said, we want to ask you a couple of questions outside. And he went outside, and we never saw my dad for the next 40 days.
So they take your dad that night. They put him in a pickup truck. These are soldiers. These are pretty scary looking soldiers, it sounds like.
Yes, yeah, they were big.
And you're 10. What does your mom tell you? Like that night when dad is not, because they originally just said we might just take him for some quick questioning. When he doesn't come home that night, what is mom telling you?
She herself was worried. I mean, she tried to calm us down. She said, it'll be fine. He's coming back. But I could see in her eyes, her tears. She was crying. She didn't know what to do.
And what was going through your head?
I was just freaking out. I mean, it's the first time we ever see this, and as 10 years old, it's that time where you actually need your parents to be there for you, and you suddenly don't have your dad who always, defends you, who you feel safe with. It suddenly goes away. It's very scary.
And your mom actually pulls you aside that night and gives you some advice to keep you safe. What does she tell you?
She actually told me that when they come in, pretend that you're sleeping, and you make your legs, you shorten them so that you curl up so you look younger, because they were taking kids who are 16, 15, and 14 years old.
Wait, you're telling me that she said if the soldiers come back, that you should pretend you should curl up so that they think you're too little to take?
Yes, yeah,
Wow. And did you do that?
I did that. I was so afraid that he tells me to stand up every
Wow.
time they would walk past me.
Wow. Because the soldiers did come at some point.
Yeah, they came. One time we came back to our house, we found everything thrown, stolen,
Wow.
and the food. They go to the kitchens and break the food jars that people save.
Wow. So at some point, you had mentioned that there's this house where there's like 20 or 30 people. This is your grandmother's house, and this is like the main gathering point for your family. And is that right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. And your mom decides, look, I'm all on my own. My husband's been taken. I'm gonna go to grandma's house so that I can have some help. The kids can have someone to play with. You get to grandma's house and you learn that your other uncles, your dad's brothers, have also been taken. And your grandmother pulls you aside and has a pretty serious talk with you. Remember, Naji's just 10 years old at this time. Tell us what grandma says to you.
She pulled me aside. She said, "Hey, Naji, the military took all your uncles and your dad. You're the only man of the house now. You have to make sure you take care of all the rest of us, because you're the only man there. So if they need anything, you have to get it, even if it means that you have to be in danger." And to me, that meant that if the military comes back and they want to hurt anyone, I am the one who has to fight them.
Even though you're 10 years old.
Yes, yeah.
Wow. And your grandmother, she sends you out on an errand. Can you tell us about that? What she sends you to do?
So she sent me and my cousin and my sister Amal to get bread, and we took the money. We went. The streets were very frightening. Um, we saw dead bodies on the grounds. We saw bombed houses, and we just kept walking like nothing was good happening. And there was a line of uh, bread store. So we stand in the line, and suddenly, a couple minutes later, someone from the back starts shooting. Um, uh, when I freaked out, we all freaked out. I can hear the gunshots passing me next to my ears. I just looked for my sister Amal. I couldn't find her, and an older lady in front of me, she got shot and she fell in front of me. Everyone started jumping on her, and then everyone's crumping up. So I was yelling Amal, Amal, and then I suddenly see her. So we grabbed each other's hand and we ran back home.
Wow. So this is your life for this period of time when your dad is taken, and eventually your mom, and we show this in the book, she's very resourceful and she manages to go down to the courthouse and get release papers for your father from prison. And she and your grandmother go and get your father and your uncles out of prison after 40 days of imprisonment and bring them home to the house. And you and your sisters and brothers, you're waiting for him to get there. Talk to me what it was like when you saw your dad walk back into the house.
That was one of the best moments I ever felt. Even though the shooting was happening outside, the killing, the bombing, me seeing my dad at that time, I had so much pressure released of me. I couldn't say anything to him. I just laid on his knee and I kept crying the whole night, because I had too much as a 10 years old. I had too much on my plate, that when I saw my dad, I felt like it all disappeared.
Well, kind of like it was the first moment that you could let your guard down.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
Wow. And what did your dad say to you?
He told me, my mom told him what I did, my grandma, so he knew what I was going through. He just said, "Don't worry, I'm here now. It's all okay."
Well, so your dad and mom decide in the end that they can't stay in homes in Syria, that it's just too dangerous, and that your dad could very easily get arrested again, and who knows what would happen to him. So they pack the family up. You end up in Jordan, which is a neighboring country to Syria that is peaceful, and you hope to go to school, but it doesn't work out going to school in Jordan. Tell us what happens when you try to go to school in Jordan.
So schools were uh, like girls' school was separated from boys' school. So my sisters, they were facing racism. They were hearing stuff, but nobody was physically, hurting them. So when I went to school, the kids would just gather around me and say, "Oh, you're a Syrian refugee. Why did you come here? You're stealing our jobs." And they would start beating me. And that happened pretty much every day I go to school. Even teachers, sometimes they would beat me about homework, but I knew that they just beat me because they don't, I'm from Syria. So one time, I came home to my dad and I had like two purple lines on my legs because of the teacher hit me with the wire. And um, the other day I went back, five kids were beating me. So my dad couldn't do anything about it, he just told me stay home. Why get beat up every day? So I sat home and for 5 years I never went to school again.
So for 5 years, you're not going to school, but at some point, you get this idea in your head that you want to come to America. Talk to me about what did America mean to you at that time?
So at that time, coming to America meant everything to me. It meant future. Um, uh, I Literally my whole life was depending on coming to the US. So if we stayed in Jordan, we couldn't work, we couldn't go to school, we'd pretty much be homeless or go back to Syria and might die. So pretty much coming to the US meant everything to me.
Wow. And you have a number of discussions with your dad, arguments even, because your dad is in a really tough situation. I say this, Naji, I always say this to you because I'm a dad too, and I love your dad. Your dad was in a tough spot because his some of his brothers and sisters had not been given the green light to come to America. And your dad's mom, your grandmother, had said, if everyone can't go, I'm not going to go. And so your dad was in a situation where he's like, am I gonna break up the family and leave my mother here? I feel like I can't do that. And on the other hand, he's thinking Naji really wants to go. And you were having some arguments with your dad, right, about this. What were you saying to your dad?
Yeah, every time I would hear my dad talking about, maybe delaying or going to the US, I would just feel like he was stopping my future and our future. We got into fights, I felt like he sometimes hated me maybe from how much I was pushing him to leave his family. I mean, we've been through war, we went left Syria together, and now, I'm telling him to leave his family and just go to the US. Even though his mom was able to come to the US, but she didn't go because she wants everyone to be together. So I understood how hard it was for him, but at the same time, it was the only choice for me.
Wow. So you have this discussion with your dad, and at the very end, finally, your dad and mom together decide we're going to go to America. Your grandmother gives you her blessing. She says, okay. You land in America, and I was telling the students this at the beginning, you land on this very important day, which is election day, when Donald Trump wins the presidency. And after he becomes president, it has a real effect on you, your family personally, right? Because it affects whether or not you're going to see your grandma. In fact, maybe tell the story of how your dad found out about the election results.
Actually, before we even come to the United States, we were watching the elections. We saw Trump's videos about talking about refugees and Muslims. and it was scary, going to a new country where back home the president or the king would control everything. So we didn't know about the checks and balances and how all that works. So to us, when we came here and Trump won the elections, the first thing that my grandma said to my dad, she sent a voicemail to my dad and she said, "Hey Ibrahim, I might not see you again. I hope all the best for you." And yeah, when my dad looked at me, he didn't say anything to me, he didn't blame me, but I felt so bad about it. I felt like it was my mistake to do that.
Hmm. And you had this kind of amazing moment on this first night where the people in the family are concerned, scared about what Trump winning the presidency might mean for you as refugees in this country. And your dad, who'd been in America probably for all of 24 hours, gives this speech to the family in which he says, we live in a democracy now. There are, as Naji referred to, there are checks and balances. There is separation of powers. No person is a dictator. We're going to be okay. To me, it's like this incredibly patriotic American moment. Or as they say, your dad's been in the country 12 hours and he's invoking the US Constitution. We're going to be, it turns out he's right. It's not easy for you. You all have some difficult things that happen to you. And one of the challenges is school. Before you joined us, we read a section from the book where you're in school, you're in gym class, and the rules to dodgeball, and you're trying to figure out the lockers. Talk to me about school. What was the most difficult part of going to school for you as a refugee who didn't speak much English?
It was pretty difficult, especially, it was pretty obvious. Me and my sister Amal had the hijab. Everyone was looking at us because, nobody else had the hijab on. It was also pretty scary because we didn't know who liked us, who didn't like us, who supported Trump's ideas. So we were in a tough situation. We don't understand the language. We don't know pretty much anything about the culture. And we're just there. Pretty much everything they do, we didn't know about.
Hmm. And this is one of the questions that we were talking about with Kira earlier. What are the sorts of things? There's probably a lot of students out there and maybe some teachers that are listening today and watching you and thinking to themselves, what could I do for the Naji that might be at my school? And they might be from Syria, or they might be from Guatemala, or they might be just from any place. What are the sorts of things that teachers or students could do to help someone in your shoes?
I think what would really make a difference is, going up to that new student, talking to them, showing them the different places in the school, how everything works. I mean, we had challenges with everything. The lunch, we didn't know how it worked. Gym classes, we didn't understand anything. So if some people would come up and introduce themselves to us, it would have made us feel a lot more comfortable and showing us how that works. And this, I think, you know, uh, as long as sitting with them at the lunchtime, that would really make them feel very comfortable because
Mm.
we faced some tough times with that.
Naji, I didn't even include this story in the book, but I remember there was a student, I think I call him in the book Wilson, and he was a kid that he was a little bit of a different kid. He spoke a little slowly, and the kids kind of made fun of him. He was an American-born kid, and you became friendly with him. And I don't know if you remember, you said to me, you said, Jake, in my old school back in Syria, like I was a popular kid. I had lots of friends. I said hello to everyone. But now I understand what it's like to be Wilson. Um,
Yes.
now I understand what it's like to be the odd guy out, right?
Yeah, yeah. When I saw him, it kind of related to me, even though he was American, but the way how he didn't have friends, they were pretty much making fun of him. It related to me, so even I was new there. I went up to him, I talked to him. He actually, at the end, he invited me to his birthday party.
Oh, he did. Okay, that's right. All right,
Yeah.
Naji, we have questions for you from the audience, and I'm just refreshing my Google spreadsheet here so we can ask them. Um, so, let me just scroll down here. Um, So a question for you. How much English, this is just they want to know, how much English did you all speak when you first landed in America?
I only knew few words. Hi, hello, kitchen, how are you? That was it.
Hmm. So you were pretty much, at the very start. Another question for you. Uh, someone wants to know, was there any doctors or healthcare professionals like who helped you out when you land? You remember, you had a lot of doctor visits. Do you remember any of them?
Um, I remember they had translation, which really helped, and there was a group of people who sponsored us, and they helped us take appointments, and that was great help because we didn't know anything.
There's a question about someone was saying, how do you get refugees to tell their stories? A lot of times people will say, don't get refugees, don't ask them to tell a story that could be upsetting. You've been through some very difficult things. What
Yeah.
would you say to someone who's worried about asking a question about your past and worrying that they're going to be upsetting you because of talking about the violent or terrible things you might have seen? What advice would you give them?
I don't think it's that bad to ask. Maybe just interview inter um like talking to that person before you ask him. Make sure they know your name, who you are, and you know them. That way they can feel more comfortable talking to you. Otherwise, it shouldn't be a big problem because they want to speak about it. They want to talk about it. I think, especially me, because it makes us feel better.
Hmm. You mentioned one time with like this idea of an ally. We talk about someone you can count on. What are the most important ways that other students, American-born students, or people that have been here a while that know the language could help you out? Is it just showing you around the school? Is it just walking up to you and saying, "Hey, what's your name? Where are you from?" Like, what would you suggest?
Pretty much, spending as much time as you can with them. Lunchtime, invite them to your table because they're scared, they're worried. So making them feel comfortable, like you're their friend, that would really help.
Um, what would you and for if there's kids out there that are refugees that are listening and are feeling the way you felt when you first arrived, which is shy, a little overwhelmed, what lessons can you offer them of advice about how they can kind of find their way to making friends and feeling more comfortable? What are things that they can do to empower themselves?
I think uh, forgetting the fact that they might not like me, I'm different, forgetting about that and trying to talk to them, tell them who you are, where you came from, makes a big difference.
Um, This is a question where someone says to me, wow, Naji, thank you for sharing these traumatic, very difficult experiences. I'm in awe of your resilience, which is something I've heard many people say to Naji. How do you think that these very difficult events have influenced you or changed you in ways either positive or negative?
I think it all was positive. It made me look at life differently and in a positive way. That it's not always the more money you have, the happier you will be, and it really more depends on your relationships and being thankful for small things that we don't see. For example, like school. A lot of kids, they no not don't like school. Being thankful to be able to go to school every day. That's a great thing.
There is we read a bit of in the comic the part about where Amal asks you, "Hey, do you think we can pray now?" And initially, at first, you say, "Ah, this is an American school. I don't know how we're going to do that." But in the end, there is a solution, and it comes to you in the form of your teacher. We call Mr. G. Can you explain how Mr. G helped you figure out a solution to that challenge?
So he was our English teacher, pretty close to us, showing us wherever what is. We actually told him about it. We pray 5 times a day, so would we be able to pray somewhere? And he actually provided us his office, and we would go pray every day. And one of the times it was funny. Amal told me, imagine someone opening the door and see us there.
because the way you pray is on the ground, kind
Yes,
of.
yeah,
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 right. I know. I'm always worried, right, that someone was going to open the door and then you would have
yeah.
to say, "Oh, this is what you're doing." Um, what, if anything, surprised you about America? I know American schools. I know you'd watched a lot of TV and movie shows where you saw American schools and pop culture, but when you actually got there, what surprised you? What happened that you might not have been expecting?
It was very organized. It was very organized. I really liked the way how it works because back home, teachers would move from one class to another, whereas in American schools, student the whole class would move to another class, and that looked impossible to my school. It would take us hours to move from one class to another. I saw a lot of organizing.
Hmm. Denzel, should we? I'm looking at the clock here and just want to check in with you. Should we continue with our questions or just a quick time check here?
Well, I wanted to bring Kira in because we do have a few questions that sort of relate to some of the things people want to know about how to create more welcoming schools. Naji sort of spoke about, someone coming up to talk to you. Are there other things that teachers could foster in their students to make them more welcoming? And maybe Naji can comment on what you suggest.
Yeah, I think the first suggestion I would give is to diversify the stories that that students are hearing in your classroom about immigrants, about the refugee experience, and just about migration in general. We know that when a lot of us tend to get the same message over and over about who a refugee is, where they come from, what they've been like, and we only have like maybe a very small picture of what that person feels or thinks. And the truth is that we're all really complex and that there are millions of refugees from all different countries around the world that have different experiences. So if we can tell more stories in our classroom, read more books, hear from immigrants and refugees who are involved in our communities, that could help to dispel some of the stereotypes and just get over maybe that apprehension about talking to someone and asking questions about their experience and making that connection.
Can I just throw in one thing? I just noticed I was reading in the chat thread here, and we have a message from Mr. E. We call him Mr. G in the book, and he is exactly the kind of teacher ally that Kira was talking about. And I just have to, he sends a shout out to you, Naji. He says, Naji, thank you for your amazing experience. We're so proud of you and your bravery and your resilience. So I wanted to just, yeah.
Oh, is he with us on the call?
He's watching on and he typed that in for you. But he
Oh,
was
thank
a
you.
very important person for you, right?
Yeah, Mr. E was pretty much everything for us. We would, if we get lost, we would look for him. Thank you so much, Mr. E, for all your help. It was amazing. We really appreciate it.
Naji, did you find that you had to educate a lot of your friends at school about what the refugee experience is like?
Yes, I had a couple times we were sitting in a class, not doing any work. They would ask me questions. Sometimes it would be funny questions, hard questions, but I really liked how they didn't really know much except what the media shows. So when I tell them our stories, they would be shocked and they never heard it before.
And Jake sort of suggested that you all decided to come to America and then you did, but it wasn't that easy, was it? And
No,
it took a long time.
we thought it would be easier than that. It was pretty difficult.
Can you just describe how long it took and what steps you all went through briefly?
So it took us about 2 years and a half to 3 years. They had to look up our names, where we came from. We had to do several meeting with the federal agencies. They would ask us questions, and then they would do a test for our health to make sure we're not, we don't have any health issues. It took about 2.5 to 3 years.
And Jake just spoke about your religion and being able to pray in Mr. E's office. How did it feel knowing your family's religion was different than most of the other people in school? And what impact did that have on you and Amal? She was wearing the hijab.
It was hard, walking in the hallway, and we would look different. My sister had the hijab. Uh, it didn't really change the way we believe, but it was pretty difficult in the beginning. Now, we're more comfortable. We can talk to people about it and tell them about it. I every day have, even at work, I tell people about how our religion works.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And Kira, have you seen a lot of this in the classroom where people need to be educated about something as simple as what is being a Muslim like? What is being Jewish like?
Yeah, absolutely. So whether sometimes we're not even fully aware of how much we receive the message that there is one religion, right, in the United States, that Christianity is very dominant. And sometimes we're not aware of how overpowering that can be, that with the way that our holidays are set up, or just assumptions that we make, that we think of Christianity as the default. So that is also incumbent upon teachers to to check their language. And when you're speaking about holidays and religions, make sure that you're speaking about it in an inclusive way. We don't need to preference, Christian holidays when we are speaking about the holiday season, for instance. And we can educate our students about why it is more respectful and more inclusive to not assume, right, that everybody is following the same religion, and to go out of our way to learn a little bit more about religions that we may not be familiar with. And I know that, I mean, speaking as a Jewish person who grew up in West Hartford, Connecticut, actually, there were a lot of Jewish people in my community, so I didn't necessarily feel like I had to do that. But in some communities, I would have not have had that experience, right? I would have been part of a very, very small percentage. Of Jewish students. So I think every teacher can think about whether there are students of many different religions, or just maybe one, most of your students are of one religion. It is still incumbent upon us to speak about all different religions that exist in our society, and check our language for that, the way that we default to a certain religion as being the main one. We need to check ourselves and make sure that we don't do that.
As someone with a Muslim last name but grew up Presbyterian and went to Sunday school, I've had a lot of those discussions myself. Jake, how can this graphic novel is for all age groups, and could you talk about how it could be used in the classroom, how it could be adapted? And Naji, how did you feel about being represented in this sort of way?
Naji, you want to answer first? I would just say that initially he was seeing it every week because it was in the New York Times. Naji, what was it like?
In the beginning, we just wanted people to know more about us refugees and Muslims, because of the idea what the media was showing. We really wanted people to actually know who we are. It makes it better. It makes it for us feel more comfortable being there, that they already have a basic idea of who we are. So doing that, the book and the story, sharing our story, was one of the ways where, it was pretty, in the beginning, it was pretty difficult sharing close details as how the book shows, but later we realized that, people really need to know that. And it was that we have to share our story for them to be, to understand.
And it was intense. We had, I was with you when you family received that death threat. There were some scary moments. It wasn't all easy to share. I will say one thing, that what I've seen Naji do is take ownership of his story. I've seen him speak in front of very large groups of people and talk about everything that him and his family have been through, and realize that, like, what is a very difficult set of events that happened to you, that you've used that and talked about what you've been through and what you've achieved to kind of empower you. And that's really awesome. People are inspired by your story. And I think I've watched you in 4 years come to realize the power of that. I don't know. Have you felt that way?
Yeah, I was really surprised of how people really like to hear our story. We didn't know that they would be that interested, and it's amazing how a lot of people wanted to know more. which shows that it's not always like how Trump says. So it make us feel a lot better.
I'll just add two other quick things, Denzel, to answer your question. The book is something that can be shared. I've shared it with my younger boys in sixth grade, right up through, college. You can share it, and it's a graphic narrative, so you can read it quickly. You can sit down and read the whole book, probably in about an hour and a half. And to give some compliments to Denzel and the folks at the ILC, they put together a phenomenal teaching guide, which teachers can use to teach the book. It has background information on the conflict in Syria. It has information on how graphic novels are read. I mean, it's incredibly comprehensive. It is in its own way as impressive as the book itself. So I would say the combination of the book and the ILC's teaching guide make it really great for classroom use.
Yep, and we just put the link in the chat box for this 9-lesson curriculum on this novel. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to give the last 2 words to Kira and Naji. Kira, if you can give one tip for teachers to make their classrooms more inclusive, something that they can employ in this remote learning sort of world, what do you think that would be?
Say, have conversations about identity with your students. Make that the fabric of your classroom culture, because doing so will both open their eyes to many different identities beyond those that are in the room, and it will also empower the students in your classroom to want to share more about themselves with their classmates.
And Naji, very last question before we wrap up. What do you hope to do with your life? What's your ambition? What do you want to be?
Now I am working on getting into a college, and my goal is to be in the medical field. I always remember the lady that fell in front of me. I really felt like I want to help her, and that really stayed with me till today, where I want to be in the medical field to save more lives.
Jake, this is just incredible. Thank you so much for joining us, Naji Aldaban, Kira Simon, and Jake Halpern. We really appreciate that you came out here to tell your story to the people in this webinar and for everyone who's going to watch the recording. So thank you so much.